Hi, this is Terry with exactlinetools. Today we're doing a repair on a black GMC roof panel. Now this can be a very difficult job, but I'm going to show you today through a series of sweeps we're going to be able to restore this top back to showroom condition. In addition to the top, we have damage on both side panels as well, which we'll also repair. We see the vehicle has sustained a crease from one side of the vehicle to the other. So it really is quite a challenge. In addition to that, you'll see, if you catch a reflection, that there is secondary damage in and around the initial crease. So there's quite a bit to it, and we'll see that as we move further into the job. But let's get started with the right side panel. We've roughed it out, we've prepared the surface, now we're applying some plastic filler. We've masked off the edge of it so we don't get the filler into the drip rail. We're using a short blade, it's only 16 inches, and we're doing our sweep across the right rail. We'll keep working that a little bit. Put the mud at the front of the sweep and transition the blade across it in a nice even sweep. We're going to knock that down with 180 grit, and it sands down fairly readily, and we'll see how it looks after the initial sanding. Blowing it off, it looks pretty good. A few little pits there. We'll fill it one more time with some plastic filler, and we'll do another sweep. As I said, we're using a shorter blade. This number 1 blade is a 16-inch blade. We offer shorter blades as well as the 24-inch blade, and this tends to work better in a small little area like that. Making our sweep. That looks great. We'll now move to the left side, which didn't have as much damage, and we'll do the same process. We've sanded the area with 180 grit so the plastic filler can adhere to the paint. Again, with the 16-inch blade, it's a number 1 blade, we're going to transition across that wet plastic filler and impart a beautiful shape. Again, we're going to knock that down with 180 grit. It's sanding down fairly quickly. Remember, there's very little overfill when we do the sweep. As we transition across it, it moves and organizes the plastic filler and removes all of the overfill. So we have a little bit here to sand down, but it should not take too long at all. Getting that all knocked down. We're going to blow it off and have a look at it. Takes me a little time to get around this car. I am working on the top of the car, so I'm inside the door jambs as well as the back of the vehicle. Putting on my dry guide coat, I'm going to do a quick block. Now I'm blocking it with 220 because I don't want to remove too much of the paint. I want to leave that intact as part of the repair medium. So we're knocking this down. Anytime you sand on a curve like that with a hard block, it tends to cut, and it can be more aggressive than you would, more aggressive cut than you would have with a foam pad. This is a hard block. Cuts it down really nice, but I'm aware that I don't want to remove too much paint. At this point, I just want to sand the plastic filler down and level it out. Getting pretty close there. I'm going to continue to sand with the hard block, rocking it back and forth. Because it's a hard block, I can sand the inside of the rib as well, where it goes into the drip rail. Because it is a hard block, it'll impart a perfectly straight line on that area that I'll be working. Just taking our time, giving a few minutes worth of sanding. You can see the way I'm rocking the blade to correspond with that curved surface. Now here I have the block on the inside the drip rail, where, as I said earlier, it's a hard block, so it'll maintain a perfectly straight cut. So I don't have any worries about that having anything but an absolutely straight cut as I'm sanding it, which will establish the edge on that portion of the panel, make it nice and straight. Working it a little bit more there. It's looking pretty good. I just about got it. Now let's move back over to the right side and we'll knock down the outer panel and get this wrapped up. Then we can start the actual repair on the roof panel. I'm sanding it with 180 grit and it's knocking down pretty quickly. Again, we don't have a whole lot of overfill when we use the blade. It establishes a beautiful shape and removes all the overfill, so it takes that down pretty quickly. Again, I'm working up on a ladder or standing inside the door jamb or at the back of the vehicle, so it takes me a little time to get around, but we're getting this underway here. We just applied the dry guide coat and we're going to block it. Again, we're using 220 grit and we will sand this area until it has the correct shape. It shouldn't take but a couple of minutes. Going from my air gun there. We'll continue to sand this and finish this up. Again, I'm rocking this hard block over this curved surface, sanding it into the paint so it'll have a perfect shape, a seamless repair. In a repair like this, I would recommend only using a hard block because it is a flat surface, and if you use a foam block you won't be able to get the straight cut that you would with a hard block. So we're sanding this a little bit more. Find my air gun, blow that off a bit. Looks really good. And we're going to sand the part of the panel that rolls down into the gutter rail. We're just moving across it. Again, with the hard block, I have no issues about not having a perfectly straight cut as I roll over that pointed edge leading into the drip rail. Just a little bit more sanding and we should have this wrapped up. Have a look at it. That looks great. Now we're going to focus our attention on the roof panel. And with 220 grit sandpaper, I'm going to block the surface, and I do this to locate the low spots. Because I'm using a hard block, I'm getting a real accurate assessment of exactly where the low areas are on this panel. I'll block it a little bit here, and I'm using 220 grit because the finer the paper, the more accurate it shows up once it's sanded. In addition to that, I don't want to remove too much paint because I'm using that as part of my repair medium. I'm blending the plastic filler into the paint. We can see the low spot right there, and we'll continue sanding, revealing the low spots throughout this roof panel. They come up pretty quickly. When you're using a hard block, it cuts only the surface that it touches. So if you have a straight hard block, it will reveal even the slightest wave. Again, 220 really helps with that. Now we see the damage there and the subsequent damage, secondary damage, in front of it. We've blocked it out and we can see all the damage around the crease, which I'm marking with a pencil so I can keep track of where I want to make my sweep. Back here as well, I'm going across here. That's going to be one continuous sweep. Now we have these areas here which are secondary damage, which I'm also going to mark. These ones do not influence the ribs. The damage is in between the ribs in these three spaces, so I'm just simply putting a line along the ribs so I'll know where to put my tape. So with 180 grit, I'm sanding down the areas that still have a glossy surface, where I have not sanded the paint yet. I'm roughing up all of this area now that I know where it is, and making sure that the surface is prepared to hold the plastic filler. With 180 grit, you'll have a good bond between the paint and the plastic filler. And I'll continue to just move across there with the DA, going over the ribs as well as the flat areas between it, knocking it down, preparing it for my first sweep. What we're going to do is a series of sweeps that will cover all of these low areas and finally make the entire roof perfectly shaped once again. Going over the rib, the third rib over there, knocking it down. I can only do a portion of the roof at a time based on the fact that I have to move from one side to the other and towards the back of the vehicle with the center sweep. So knocking them down, getting them ready, do a sweep. We're going to blow this off and have a look at it, make sure there's no more areas in that area that is unsanded. We're going to want to make sure all the gloss is off the paint and it's ready to be coated with plastic filler and shaped. A couple of areas there that needed a little bit more. This is really important. You want really good adhesion. You don't want to have any issues of plastic filler not sticking to the paint. I'm going to blow it down. We got that nice and clean. We've done our sweep over there. Essentially, I've used the number 1 blade and made one continuous sweep from the 3rd rib on the right all the way over to the drip rail. You can see we've transitioned very easily over all of the ribs. The area now is going to be sanded down with 180 grit. Now I'm using a finish DA with 180 grit, and I'm very lightly, almost floating over the top of the plastic filler. I want to do this because any pressure that you put on a roof panel will almost automatically distort it. And if we're sanding in such a way that we're distorting the panel, well, a distorted repair is baked into the cake. So we want to be very gentle and very light on the pressure that we're resting down on this roof panel with the finished DA. I'm literally holding it up slightly just to have it glide over the surface and knock down the plastic filler. This is really important on any roof panel, but this one in particular. Now we're going to fill that secondary damage which I pointed out earlier. I've masked off the ribs because there's no damage in that area on the ribs. So we're going to make our fill with the plastic filler here. You can see the pencil lines are still there. If they're not, always apply a pencil line there again so you can keep track of where you're going. Again, right up to the pencil line. It doesn't matter if you go over it a little bit, but you want to be at least up to the line because that's the outermost part that I'm identifying of the damage when I make that pencil line. So we're getting a nice coat, an even coat all the way across the area that we want to sweep. So we can get a nice even sweep without any gaps in the middle. Got a little piece of hardened plastic, just pick that out. Now we're ready to sweep. We're using the 24-inch blade and we're going to sweep, pressing down just outside of where the plastic filler ends as our control surface. I'm going to remove the plastic filler from the edge of the blade, put it at the front of the sweep. We'll make our sweep until we get a good one here. I'm happy with that. Then we'll go on the second one and try to make a nice fill there. That looks like an excellent sweep. It just has that one little gap, which we will go over a couple more times until we move and organize the plastic filler to cover that. Sometimes you have to put it directly into that area and then do your sweep. That looks pretty good. Alright, now we're going to do the center of the roof panel. I'm at the back of the vehicle, as you can see, and I'm applying my plastic filler. Want to get a nice even coat there. You can see also the damage went up the rib, so I put my tape accordingly so I can sweep right up to where I want it to end. We're using the number 1 blade and we're going to be doing our sweep from rib to rib. Remember that we don't need to try to do the full repair with one sweep. We're building up to a perfect shape through subsequent sweeps. I put the plastic filler on top of the rib at the front of the sweep, and I'm making a few more sweeps here. Now with 180 grit, we're going to knock down the areas on the right side of the vehicle that had little time to cure. Again, I'm holding the finish DA very light on the surface. I just want to hold it up just a little bit so it just glides over it. If you can watch the panel and the reflection towards this side of the plastic filler, you'll see that it's not distorting as I move across it. I'm being very careful to be very gentle with this roof panel. Again, very easy to flex the panel, and if you do that while you're sanding, the results will be a distorted repair. We're sanding again with 180 grit. I'm just knocking it down a little bit here. Alright, we're sanding the center piece, the center of the roof, and the ribs on either side of it. Just knocking it down a little bit, again with 180 grit. What I like to do on a job like this is to work back and forth with it, to do some sweeps. For example, on the right side, let it cure as I do a sweep elsewhere, as I've done here in the center, and I'll soon be traveling to the left side. Again, the main thing I'd like to stress here is being very gentle with your sanding. Do not lean on the roof panel while you're doing your work. Sometimes I'll see technicians resting their elbow while they're sanding vigorously in some area. Other than that, they're creating another wave with their elbow. So you want to not only be very gentle with the sander, but you don't want to lean on the panel either. Now you can see the areas that I masked off. Inside the two ribs, we're applying some plastic filler in the center of the roof panel. There was no damage along the rib, either rib at that point, so we've masked them off. We don't want to put any plastic filler on the rib if it has no damage. Again, with the number 1 blade, we're making a nice sweep across it. It's going to level out those low areas that we've discovered outside of the initial crease across the roof panel. Now we're going to take and block the areas on the left side of the car, and as you can see, we're using 220 grit. I'm gliding this hard block over the area. You can see a tiny bit of movement just in front of the sanding block where you can catch the light reflection. It's moving just slightly. A tiny bit of movement like that shouldn't cause you any problems, but I'm just indicating that we have to be very, very gentle in our sanding. It takes longer, but you'll get a nice straight cut, and you'll see where the low areas are very clearly if you just take the time to block it. This is something that you'll want to do on any panel that's weak. Many door skins are extremely weak as well, and you're going to need to be very easy on your sanding. You don't want to push down too hard, otherwise you're going to distort it as you're repairing it and you'll go nowhere. So we block that a little bit. I'm turning the block the other way. Try to get a little better cut out of the paper. It tends to get clogged after a while as when you're using fine paper, but if you turn it around, it helps to clear that out sometimes. So again, just gliding over it, a lot of fast strokes, but with very little pressure on it. You can see here quite easily just where the damage is. I've finished sanding the entire left side, and you can see all the damage. The crease is pretty obvious right across there, as well as the secondary damage right in the middle panel. So I'm making some marks with the pencil. These are the marks that will guide me in applying and the plastic filler and doing my initial sweep. After I do the initial sweep, I'll do this area that I'm marking right now. 2 separate sweeps. Here we don't need to go into the rib, so I'm putting a mark there. There I have to go over the rib. Alright, once again I'm sanding down all of the paint that has gloss to it with 180 grit, preparing it so it'll adhere to the plastic filler. Simply take my DA and sand that until it's completely flat or sanded. The secondary damage I mentioned is the area just in front of the DA. It's quite a large area, and that's directly related to the impact in the crease that traveled from right to left across the entire roof panel. That's an area that would be difficult to see, but in block sanding it with a hard block with fine paper, it reveals all of the damage. Knocking that area down now, prepping it for plastic filler. We have it all marked down, and I'm going over the pencil lines that I drew originally just to make them a little more bold so I don't lose track of them, so I know exactly what to do and where to do it. Now on this side you're going to see how I made the sweep on the right side. I'm going to transition across all 3 ribs on the right side, I beg your pardon, on the left side, and the area in between them as well, with one continuous sweep. And you'll see how easy it is to do that. But first we need to apply plastic filler to every square inch of it that we're going to sweep. We want to have it on the surface, completely covering the painted area, pressing it into it so it's very well attached to the paint, and then we can glide over it easily with the blade. Number 1 blade, pressing down just outside of the areas that I just filled. That is the control surface that I'm tapping into at this point. Make a nice sweep across there. The blade has a bead of plastic filler left on it from the plastic filler that it moved and organized in the initial sweep, and it just moves it across. So we're going to lightly knock this down now. Again, I'm very gentle with the finish DA using 180 grit. If you just take your time with this, it'll make the job actually a lot quicker instead of trying to rush it by pushing down harder. Also, changing up the paper frequently will also, of course, make it cut a lot quicker if you use new paper. This is something that I do a lot when I'm working a flexible panel or a weak panel. I'll use a little bit more paper, but being that it's 180 grit, a 6-inch disc, it's a very cheap piece of paper to begin with. So using 3 or 4 pieces of it really doesn't add up to much at all. Sanding up the side of the rib a little bit there. As you can see, we have some different shaped ribs. The ribs in the center The three in the center are rectangular, and the two ribs on the outside are triangular. They come up like a pyramid. But it really doesn't matter which shape they are. The blade simply transitions across it and transmits the shape of the rib across the damaged area. Here we're blowing it off, taking a look at it. Feels really good. Now we're going back to the center, and we're going to fill that area that we indicated. Again, we've masked off the sides of the rib, just at the bottom of the rib, where we don't need any filler on that rib, and we'll do the same on the on this area, except for on the right side where we don't go over the rib. Again, using the number 1 blade, we'll sweep across that flat area up into the tape. Get a good sweep here. As I'm making my sweep, it too does not distort the panel, which is a unique characteristic of the blade. It distributes the weight across the blade and does not come down heavy on it as to distort the panel, even if you're pressing quite firmly. We'll try running it from the other side. Never hurts to try a different approach angle. You might find that that's the one that works best. We're going to pull it back this way towards the outside of the car. Alright, we have a nice sweep. We've begun sanding it once again with 180 grit. Again, lightly gliding over the surface with some new sandpaper. It cuts off fairly readily. As you can see, I'm hardly pressing down on it on the finished DA at all. But you can see the powder that is being generated from the sanding. It's sanding just fine. Looks real good. Let's move over to the next flat surface. As you can see on this area, we had to transition across the triangular rib on the left. There was some damage there, and whether you're just filling the area in between the ribs or going over the ribs, it's all the same. It's a simple transition with the blade. Taking my time sanding this. And we'll get that last little area just before the gutter rail. Alright, we're going to do our first block sanding, and we're back on the right side of the vehicle. We're applying the dry guide coat carefully onto the ribs and across the flat surfaces in between. And then we're going to want to do a nice block sanding of that area and see what is still there that needs to be filled. Going to blow the extra guide coat off. Well, before we do that, we'll apply it on this next area as well. Takes me a little bit of time to get from one side of the car to the other, but we're getting it. And now we're covering the center section of the top with the dry guide coat. What we want to do is an initial block sanding to see just how much of it has been filled and what still remains low that we need to fill. We're using 180 grit. Now I'm using the hard block, and again I am pressing very light, as I did when I blocked it with 220, to reveal the low areas. Very light. The technique that I often use is rather quick strokes, but very, very light pressure. You can see, if you can catch any reflections, that the panel's not bouncing around. Very important that I don't press too firmly and create any sort of flex in that panel, because it'll show up in the final result. Here we go. We're sanding this down here. I slide the block right up to the rib. Let's blow this off. Actually, I'm going to move to sand it a little bit more. I think I can get that down a little bit more. Changing the direction of the block, helping it cut a little bit better. Because it's a hard block, I also have a nice straight cut up against the rib as well. So as I said initially, this is the only block I could use, that is to say a hard block, in this repair, for the reasons I've just indicated. Giving that a little bit more sanding. Again, it takes a little more time when you're hardly pressing down on it, so feel free to change up your sandpaper to keep the surface clean by blowing it off, as well as the sandpaper, and try to get all the cut out of it that you can. Now we're working up the side of the rib. It has a slight about a 45-degree angle, and then it goes flat on the top. So we're just knocking that down a little bit. Then we go across the top of it, knocking that down. Alright, we've completed our sanding, and we can see the areas that we've sanded. There's a little bit more that needs to be done, but we're going to move over to the left side and do the 3 panels there and see how that looks. We're applying the dry guide coat over the entire area, the ribs, the flat areas, so we can do a nice block sanding. Working it again very lightly, turning the block around, getting a little better cut out of it at the opposite angle there, and just slowly working it. Slow in the sense of cutting. We can move quickly, but we're only cutting a little bit off because we're hardly pressing down on it. Again, if you keep an eye on any area on the top panel that is shiny and you watch for any sort of movement, you'll see that I'm generating very little movement in the top panel in an effort to sand it flat without flexing the panel, thus creating a distortion. Well, we've completed our sanding. This is our first block sanding, and looking at it from a bird's eye view, we can see that there's some areas that need to be filled. We've completed a lot of the repair thus far, but we need to do a little bit more. I'm going to use the number 2 blade because the top panel is pretty flat. I've been using the 1, but I'm switching to the number 2 blade with a stiffener. I've marked off the ribs with tape because the areas that need fill are in the area where we don't even cross over the rib. There wasn't any damage in those areas. So that's my test sweep. We're applying, this time, a straight putty glaze, which has a nice viscosity and yields a beautiful sweep. When you use putty glaze by itself, you can get a remarkable sweep because it's a very fine material. Great resins and nice solids in it that lend themselves to sweeping really beautifully, and I'll show you after we do these sweeps just how beautiful this material can be when you use it just by itself. You don't want to use it if you have a heavy fill to do, a deep fill, but on surface areas like this where there's just a little bit of distortion, especially on a weak top like this, this can work just really great. So I'm going across the area and I'm going to fill the next area down with putty glaze. Remove it from the edge of the blade and fill this area up. Make sure I get a good coat of plastic filler everywhere that I want to make my sweep. Putting the blade right up against the tape there and doing my sweep. Now you can see the reflection off in the putty glaze. It looks like wet paint, but more importantly you can see the shape is already in beautiful alignment with the original shape of the roof panel. Now we're going to do the center section. We're going to do the left side in between the three ribs. Again, we're using our putty glaze. We're using the number 2 blade and the stiffener and just making a nice sweep. I'm pressing down at the very edge of where the plastic filler has been spread and getting a nice beautiful sweep. Now this area is it's quite a large area that's still low, which I could see in the initial assessment. You can see it in the video where I examine the roof panel before we begin the repairs, and there's a big dip there. So mind you, it's only a matter of a few mils, but it's enough to create a huge distortion in a black panel, especially if it's flat like this. Again, pressing the blade down on both sides, getting a really nice sweep. We've got a few gaps in the mud. We're going to transfer the plastic filler from the edge of the blade right to that area that we need it and make our sweep. As it moves and organizes the plastic filler, produces a real nice shape. Very good. Now we're doing the center section here. Filling it with our putty glaze. Once I make these sweeps, I will pull the masking tape off before it cures to make the job easier. I'm making my sweep again, covering that entire area with a nice even application of plastic filler. You can see at this point that we've really gained a lot of ground. We're nearly done with this repair. And as I said initially, this can be a very difficult repair. Now we're sanding it. We're starting on the right side, giving it some time to cure. We're using 180 grit. And if you catch the reflection, again, anywhere on the panel, you'll see that I'm not distorting the panel. I'm sanding very lightly. We want to avoid any distortions of the panel throughout this entire repair process. It's really important. Moving over into the section just on the other side of the rib we were working. Another nice thing about putty glaze, especially in a scenario like this, putty glaze tends to sand a lot easier. It powders and sands easier. In addition to it laying down so smooth and flat, it doesn't require a whole lot of sanding. Again, we're blocking it with 180 grit. We're starting in the middle of the roof panel. I'm at the rear of the car right now on a ladder, and I'm sanding that section. Blow it off a little bit here and see where we're at. I'll sand a little bit over here. I like to move around a bit, get the initial sanding going, change my paper, and then finish my sanding. Okay, we have completed all the sanding. We can see that it all looks really great. There's no guide coat remaining except for this one area, which we will do a fill on next. Okay, we've masked off the ribs. We're applying our putty glaze over the low-lying area there. You can see as I'm finishing this roof panel, we have the glass man removing the front windshield, which was necessary for the paint process. That should do it. We'll block it out, and we're about to wrap up this repair. So you can see through a series of sweeps we've accomplished a lot of work, and with a few cautions about not pressing too hard and being careful in our sanding technique, we were able to accomplish a lot of work fairly quickly. We'll blow it off. Got a little bit left to sand. Let's have a look at it. This is the panel after it's all been sanded. Another bird's eye view. We can see the side panels repaired, the entire roof panel. Let's have a look at it in paint. We can see we've produced a perfectly shaped panel. The ribs have perfect shape to them. The panels in between the ribs have a perfect shape. We'll get a little bit lower angle in a moment so you can really sight it out. Another fantastic job with the blade. Thanks for watching.